having the courage to make mistakes.
That's huge.
That's even here in Thailand, I get nervous. I don't make as many mistakes as I should, so I don't learn as quickly as I should.
Yeah.
But there, I couldn't expect to be out in the slums and have people learn English.
Of course not.
You know, and you see sometimes here, even tourists are like, why don't you speak English? It's like, you're in their country. Learn their language.
After all these experiences, comparing yourself the early days of public speaking, how do you look at it different?
I think my comfort level is because, in my experience, you are never going to be speaking about something that is not your topic, and nor should you. In Thailand, for example, there isn't a word for counsellor. So what I do doesn't have a word. So that says a lot about the culture. Well, how much counselling is going on and how much therapy is going on in Thailand if they don't have a word?
Welcome to Heads and Tails. I'm your host Fatih, and today we are joined by Romi Grossberg, a counselor, public speaker, and author whose journey is all about transformation and purpose. In this episode, we dive into her experiences working with street kids in Cambodia, empowering them through hip-hop and hope. We'll hear her unique insights on cultural differences, like why the Thai language has no word for counselor and how she uses creative therapy techniques to help others heal. Romi also shares practical tips on emotional regulation, making peace with flaws, and the incredible story behind her books, Hip Hop and Hope being the most recent one. So stick around to discover how her work is changing lives and where the kids she mentored are now. Let's jump in. Can I get a little sound check from there?
Hello.
All right.
Are we being videoed? Is that a camera?
Rocking and rolling as we speak.
I would have worn something nicer.
No, I think the image is always the one that kind of like hooks people, but the substance is what makes people
Keeps
stay.
them there.
Yeah.
True. Let's be interesting then.
Exactly.
Right.
Well, I want to preface this by showing my gratitude for your time. I know it's very, very valuable and precious, and hopefully my curiosity about Romi will deliver something of value to you as well. And yeah, thank you for being here. All right, Romi, how's it been?
Good.
Traveling is probably different when you're out talking about something that you're super passionate about rather than just like traveling because traveling.
Yeah, absolutely. I find as I get older, I tend to only travel with purpose. Whereas when I was younger, I just traveled or backpacked or went to new cities because I was interested.
Just
and
a little tip. This one picks up right here. So
okay.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
So when I was younger, I traveled for the sake of traveling, and now I travel always with purpose. So right now I'm doing all my travel for my book launch, but traveling for work, traveling for professional development, for training, for conferences, things like that.
Yeah. When was it that you kind of switched over to purposeful traveling? I'm sure it's not just a book. You know?
Yeah, no, it was quite specific for me actually. I mean, I'm a therapist, so as a counselor, I really recognize the difference between people that travel. I don't know if anyone in the room wants to acknowledge their point of travel.
Right.
We normally travel or we move somewhere to either run away from where we're coming from or to run to where we're going. And there was a distinct difference at some point of me running away from Australia and from home to travel and see things. And when I first moved to Cambodia in 2010, it felt very much like the first time I was running to something.
Oh, that's a good way to put it. Because oftentimes what I observe in myself and reflected on others is this escape from something that you should be dealing with.
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter at which point of the universe you are in physical space. It's like something that in you that you need to go inwards to. How did you know that it was something that you were going in?
I think when I got the job in Cambodia, I knew that I was going to something to fulfill a dream and to live out what I felt was a purpose,
Right.
as opposed to when I was younger and I was just traveling because I didn't feel like I fit into Australia, as in all my friends were, I don't know, doing what you're meant to do, I guess, getting jobs and getting married and having children and
I thought you were going to say surf.
Surf? No.
Australian people
Just the sort of, I suppose, cultural, societal pressures of what we're, I suppose, meant to do.
Sure.
And that didn't feel right to me. So I was constantly kind of escaping. And you'll notice even here, like we all live in Thailand, but there'll still be people that keep traveling, like they keep needing to escape. And I always sort of laugh to myself as a counselor. I'm like, you can't run away from yourself. You take you with you.
Yes.
Yeah. So that doesn't work.
Yeah. Even like within Thai, well, I don't know. It's kind of justified here because people have like, oh, it's the smoky season, like the weather's crap, and oh, I have to run away, run my visa stuff and whatnot. But yeah, I totally subscribe to the whole like going in something rather than like running away from it.
Well, it's funny. I lived in Koh Phangan for 8 years.
Oh, you could really?
And I did 8 monsoons in a row.
Oh, damn.
And I didn't realize that I could leave. Like here in burning season, everybody knows you leave for burning season if you can. And I did 8 monsoons in a row, and it was depressing and it was horrible. But it never occurred to me to leave. Like this was my home. Right. So I just did it. And then one year I actually came to Chiang Mai after 8 monsoons. I was like, oh, this is what people do in monsoon. What was I thinking? But it was home, and I was happy, and I was content, and I was working. So it didn't occur to me to get up and go away for 2 months. That never entered my mind.
Yeah, that's interesting because how did your way of looking at mental issues change after having spent, because like you've been like 20 years here, like
15
years. Yeah. Dang. So like I'm relatively new, and I'm curious to know what your views on mental health was, because like in the West there's different mental issues, but like over here it's not that they don't exist, So
within the Thai culture, or within the expats,
expats and natives both.
I think mental health is mental health.
Yeah.
I don't think it changes because you got on an aeroplane. No. If you had depression at home, you may well have depression here. You might have found different ways to deal with it. If you have anxiety at home, you'll have anxiety here. But again, sometimes people use the change of location as a way of dealing with it or addressing it, but they still need to be addressed.
Right. Yeah. Of course, like you can't run away from yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. So, like, tell us about Cambodia a little bit. I haven't been yet. So, like, what was interesting? What drew you in the first place, other than the work?
The work.
Only
I went there because I was invited to.
Right.
So it wasn't sort of like a dream location. I don't think I'd given it any thought before.
Oh.
I was applying for international positions in international development, community development in different areas. And I was offered 3 jobs at the same time. So one was in Phnom Penh in Cambodia, one was in East Timor, and one was in Uganda. Yeah. And I chose the Cambodia one because they all had incredible job descriptions, but the Cambodia one was a hip hop center with young people in the slums in Cambodia. And I just thought, what a wild combination of things. And also when I was young, I was a bit of a dancer. Center? A hip hop center. Well, so in Cambodia, in Phnom Penh, it's an NGO, so a non-government organization, and they use hip hop and breakdance as a way of engaging with this kind of forgotten underworld.
Oh.
So rather than say going up to, gang members or kids on drugs or alcohol or victims of family violence, you couldn't walk up to them and say, hey, do you want to go to school or do you want to get an education? They just look at you like you're insane. They don't know where their next meal's coming from. But then you're like, hey, do you want to come break dance? Their eyes light up. And KK, who's the founder of the organization, was a very big draw card. Everyone wanted to dance with KK. So we brought them in through the breakdance and then use hip-hop and breakdance and all forms of hip-hop to kind of empower them, really, because the dance floor is a super powerful place, especially in, I call them non-verbal communities. So somewhere like Cambodia, where you don't talk about your feelings or you don't talk about the violence at home or the problems that you're having that you ended up on drugs or whatever it is.
Right.
but you can express yourself on the dance floor, and you can move through things on the dance floor, and you can get rid of that agitation and energy on the dance floor.
Yes.
So it's
It
very
found an
powerful.
outlet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and hip hop especially is, I mean, centuries of, pain and suffering kind of like adds up to, I don't know, growing up in New York, I saw like dudes get together like in these like ciphers, like they just like rhyme together, and like it felt very therapeutic for them because like looking at it from the outside, it kind of like bobbing together at the same time.
And they can be total strangers that look like they've been
they're always
brothers
strangers.
forever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So when you're talking street kids in Phnom Penh out in the slums that have no family or have limited family or have violent families, finding a safe place where they can come together and they can have this brotherhood and sisterhood and feeling of family and not have that anywhere else is a very powerful tool.
Yeah. Tell me about your journey, like showing up there as like this complete stranger, like the Falang, and then how do you like what's the journey like to be more integrated into the whole
group? Look, it's really slow and difficult. And here I'm a Farang, and in Cambodia I'm a Barang. So and a Barang, and Barang just literally translates to French.
Oh,
and from the French colonization, any outsider was considered a French because of the French colonization back in the day. So then it just stuck. All foreigners just became Barang. And it's not a derogatory term. Like I would say that I was one, and that was perfectly fine. But I think it's a very slow process, and I think people that try and do it too quickly probably don't end up doing it very successfully.
Yeah.
You can't force your way into a friendship or into any kind of camaraderie. You have to take your time. You have to learn from them, which is most important. And you have to learn the culture, the language. So back in the day, I spoke pretty fluent Khmer.
Oh. How'd you learn it?
I studied very hard. I did.
No magic secrets.
I did a 1 month training of study, like when I first landed before I started work. So I did a month of language training and cultural training when I first landed. And then I got myself a tutor.
Oh, nice.
And I studied every morning before work, because that way my brain would start the day in Cambodian language, and then I could go straight to work and continue and practice.
Which one made the biggest impact, you think? Morning at work, having the tutor, or anything else?
I think starting the day in Khmer, like as in switching my brain into Khmer at 8 a.m. and then going straight to work and being able to practice, having the courage to make mistakes.
That's huge.
That's the heart. Even here in Thailand, I get nervous. I don't make as many mistakes as I should, so I don't learn as quickly as I should.
Yeah.
But there, I couldn't expect to be out in the slums and have people learn English.
Of course not.
And you see sometimes here, even tourists are like, why don't you speak English? It's like, you're in their country. Learn their language or accept.
A little bit of, like consideration goes a long way.
Yeah, so I didn't expect them to speak English. So, and also as I started to get to know the kids, and by kids I mean from 4 to like 24 years old kind of thing. When I started to get to know them and I could see how troubled a lot of them were, and how the frustration for me is I have the counseling skills, but I don't have the language skills. So I knew that was a bridge that I could, that I could cross if I learnt the language and learnt it well.
Mistakes is huge because that's how we learn language as kids, like you just like, and then like course correction.
Yeah.
But yeah, like showing the respect to people, like you said, rushing into things is kind of the lack of it, but like taking your time and sort of investing in language and customs definitely pays out. But you don't do it so that it pays off,
No, you do it. I think you do it because you want to. I wanted to because I wanted to be able to communicate with the kids more effectively. Right. Well, at all.
Yeah.
I needed to learn it to do my job.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to do it in their language out of respect.
Right.
And what I learned, and I've lived in a lot of Asia and I've learned a lot of different languages, but what I learned there was when you start understanding the language, you've reached that point when you understand the jokes, when you understand the nuance.
Yes.
And I'll be in a meeting and everyone will be talking Khmer, and then I'll giggle and everyone will just look at me. They're like, oh wow, the white girl actually now speaks Khmer. So that was really, really cool and very motivating. And And once you've got there, then you understand the culture on an entirely different level that you cannot understand it if you don't speak the language, because the language is everything. And the words that they choose to use, like even now in Thailand, we learn certain words in classes, but then you go into the streets and they use different words.
Yeah.
So understanding the words and why they use what words, and as an author I'm very into words, so things like in Thailand, for example, there isn't a word for counselor. So what I do doesn't have a word, so that says a lot about the culture. Well, how much counseling is going on and how much therapy is going on in Thailand if they don't have a word?
Is it because they don't need it?
No. As someone that's worked here for 10 years, no, that's not why.
There's definitely a gap for it.
Yeah. There's a psychiatrist, which is, the translation in Thai is a doctor of the mind.
Oh, okay.
And there's a consultant, which to me is a bit more businesslike.
Yeah.
But there's no words in between that. So that for me was fascinating. I always look at language when I enter a new country.
Yeah. Interesting. So no counseling in Thailand. Yeah, I have heard from a lot of other accounts, like Thai people who grew up in schools and stuff, that the bullying culture is huge here. And especially, like, if you're from Isan, if you look like you're from Isan, if you have like Isan slang just like stuck in your mouth, people will give you a hard time.
And the bullying, I was going to say it's different. It's hard to explain. I would see bullying even within
psychological.
Well, even within the center that I was managing, I would see bullying in terms of they would tease each other for either something that they could see or make. It was bizarre because they don't consider it bullying. It's very pointing out the obvious.
Oh.
Do you know what I mean? So
pointing out your flaws that you can't change?
Yeah. So like, say you have a big nose, they would tease you about your big nose, but they wouldn't consider it bullying. They're just pointing out the fact that you have a big nose.
But they're not saying like, oh, it's like a beautiful big nose. It's like, look at that big ass, like.
Well, they would tease you to your face. There's not so much teasing behind back, but teasing to your face.
Okay.
But it also is just as hurtful.
Yeah,
so
it is.
it's kind of strange.
Yeah. But again, I guess it's like the thick skin, like, part of it. I guess, like, if you make peace with your big nose in your beginning life, it's easier. Like, I don't know.
I think generally in Asia, and I know this is a huge generalization, but you're kind of taught to get on with it. You don't talk about mental health. A bit more now in these days, but you don't grow up learning about mental health, talking about mental health. People aren't asking you how you're feeling or telling you to look after yourself and do your self-care practice.
Right.
They're not sort of normal things that would be spoken in the household.
Right.
So when I have Thai clients, for example, the conversations that we have are quite different to when I have Farang clients.
Of course. And I think that's why I kind of blurted out. It's like, is it because they don't need it? You know, like it's to a certain extent, I believe that to be true because it's like the way of relating to the world is like fundamentally different. So like people from the West could look at the situation of being bullied as like, oh my God, like, you know, there's something wrong, like have all these like thoughts that they would have to express to someone and like get it back and then like counseled that way, whereas like other people around here like use I'm thinking out loud and trying to figure it out, like fumbling around with.
Well, I suppose if you look at the school system, if you've ever worked within any school system, the schools, and again generally in Asia, but I say that from experience, is the rote learning system. So you are taught to not question your teacher, and not question your elder, not question your parents.
That was teaching in Turkey.
Yeah, so you are taught to say after me, and that's that. And very much in the West, we are taught to, you know, critical thinking.
Right.
So it's a very different upbringing, even in that respect. We're taught to question everything, and they are taught to not question. So I think things also, again, are changing more now.
Have you learned or seen like the shift of thinking with your students and the people that you were counseling? Did you kind of introduce like the critical ways of thinking, or was it sort of like you just was a container and just like
No, look, I think, you know, every client is different, so every client has different needs. I I do some professional development training in international schools where I'm teaching the teachers.
Oh, okay.
So I'm teaching the staff how to identify different aspects of mental health within their students.
Yeah.
Because I think teachers are very much the first line of defense. They're the first, the first responders.
Sure.
They're the ones that see everything.
Of course.
But they are not usually skilled. Why would they be? They're trained as teachers. They're not trained as counselors. But they would see everything but might not notice because they don't know what to look for. So I do a lot of training in that respect, hopefully to help schools better understand. But then you see certain schools that are particularly interested in having someone like myself come, and certain schools that are flat out not interested.
Right.
You look at the rate of how many schools in Thailand have counsellors as part of their school curriculum. I would dare say in Australia there probably wouldn't be a school at all that doesn't have at least minimum number of counsellors. So things like that I notice.
Yeah. Do you think, I don't know if you looked at any statistics, but like Australia versus Cambodia, let's just say, do you think the cases, well, you can't really like file cases if you don't have the necessary infrastructure for it, but like just from your slice of experience, do you think?
No idea in terms of statistics. When I was, I think in 2011 in Cambodia, their university, one of the universities was doing the first ever social work degree, and I was mentoring their, I think, first or second year students, but that was a new degree.
Yeah.
So even that says a lot that in 2011 they were having that for the first time, and they would come and work for me like as a student in the center, and I would ask them lots of questions and I would give them kind of case studies and things like that. And yeah, I don't know how well that went. It was a bit disastrous because it was very much, I would say, well, what would you do in this scenario? And they're like, well, we just fix it. I'm like, well, how? Well, we tell them that everything will be okay and then it's fixed. It's like, wow, okay, there's a very sort of low understanding of psychology and people and human nature.
I see.
But again, that's 2011. I don't know what it's like today.
Yeah. Well, given the pace of change that I've observed in Thailand, I don't think it's much different. Like, I think like people take a lot of things for what it is, and like to make peace with like what is and like look at what will be is just this thing as, oh, it's this one process that's all happening. Is like a common attitude in Asia.
Yeah, no, I would say mental health is growing very quickly across the world, and I would say that Asia would be a part of that.
Awesome.
Yeah. I don't know to what degree, but
yeah. Well, we want to have more people kind of speaking up about the issues that they've been having. I think personally, being exposed to like two different, like what you're describing is kind of my family life, right? Like being raised in Turkey, like this latter part of my life where it was kind of like, okay, you don't question much, you just do things, like isn't the most productive way or isn't the most alleviating way. It didn't really like flow, like as it were. So like talking about it and kind of putting it in perspective helps people organize like different parts of whatever they're like dealing with.
Look, for me, I think that always needs to be balanced, People sometimes come to counseling because, what do you want from life? I want to be happy. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? What we want is balance. We want to feel the full range of emotions in balance with each other. Human nature, we have good days, bad days, good minutes, bad minutes. As long as we have resilience and we recover from all of these things and come back to this kind of balanced space, then I think that's all we can kind of hope for. And that can be good.
Yeah. And talking about it in public also is, I don't know, I think it's really, really important. Wanted to ask like this is my personal question about just public speaking. So you did like TEDx talks in Cambodia, you did like South by Southwest, and like after all these experiences, comparing yourself the early days of public speaking, how do you look at it different?
I love public speaking. I always joke. I'm like, give me a microphone any day of the week. I don't know. I just love it.
Yeah.
I won't do singing, but I will do public speaking.
Right.
I think my comfort level is because in my experience, you are never going to be speaking about something that is not your topic, and nor should you. So if you were asking me about, medicine or, I don't know, basketball, not the person to ask those things, so I wouldn't be the person sitting here.
Sure.
So I can only be me with my experience, and I would never say yes to any kind of interview or public speaking on a topic that wasn't something that I was, one, very experienced in, and two, very comfortable in. And then just having the courage to say, I don't know if you don't know, because otherwise you start fumbling and making a mess. I've just always loved it from young. We used to have these public speaking competitions at school that I used to love, making up stories and then delivering them. I think the only time, I would say only once in my life have I actually been afraid.
Yeah.
And that was during the TEDx.
Oh, wow.
That was
it
terrifying.
A big audience?
Yeah, it was not that the audience was big. I mean, it was, but it was the idea that I was doing it.
Oh.
So when I was first asked, and you'll see in my book Hip Hop and Hope, I talk about being asked to do the TEDx talk, and I'd never heard of TED.
Oh, really?
I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. I didn't know what they wanted, and then I looked it up. And then I thought, holy shit, like, why are they asking me? And then I looked at all the incredibly famous people and I thought, I'm not in that league. What do they want from me?
Yeah.
And I remember fumbling my way through the emails of pretending I knew what we were talking about and not having a clue. And I remember them asking me, do you want us to assign you a mentor? I'm like, I don't need a mentor. And then going through it all, I'm like, oh no, yeah, you need a mentor. Like, I didn't know anything. I just sort of said yes. I don't know why. And so before
So
getting
they just
up,
like seek you out? Is that how TED works?
yeah,
Wow. Okay.
yeah, I guess.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, in Cambodia, I had lots of interesting experiences like that. You know, the Princess of Cambodia, Soma, she also sought me out to do a radio interview.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I'm
not special.
Well, hers was emerging female leaders in Cambodia.
Oh, wow.
And it was the first and only English speaking radio station. So that was really cool. And that was actually just before the TED. But TED for me was scary because my understanding was only what I read on the internet, which was it streamed live worldwide in front of, like, you know, the fact that it was streamed live worldwide and the whole world was watching.
Yeah.
And you weren't allowed to have notes. And the biggest thing for me was the time limit. So 18 minutes is a TED Talk.
That is you need to prepare though.
Well, it's not that it's long. I could talk for 5 hours.
No. The shorter the interview is, the more you have to prepare.
It's just, how do I know when I've hit 18 minutes? What if I just ramble and, and then I get cut off, or I didn't know how that worked.
So it's the lack of information.
It was just me not knowing how to mentally know when I'd gotten to 18 minutes and had I made my point and what was my point and all of that. Like, you've got such a big stage, you want to make sure that you're making a very good point.
Sure.
So that was really scary. But other than that, no. I mean, South by was different because it was just exciting to be in the US. I was like an anomaly. I was like the Australian in Texas. So weird and really exciting. And everyone was so lovely and so happy that I was there. So that was actually very fun and relaxing.
Nice. It sounds like all of this experience, sort of like collecting memories and writing them, has opened a lot of like amazing doors for you. Do you think that would be the case if you did literally anything else?
Like what? As in different line of work?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. I don't feel like any of them were very conscious choices, as in, I suppose I just do what I do, and if other people find it interesting, great. But all the international development work, the community development work, it was just something I was really passionate about. And I did volunteer stints in India and in Vietnam, and I was working toward.
Oh, so you were volunteering as a young.
Yeah. Oh. So I knew that was where I wanted my life direction to go. I was a counsellor in Australia. I worked in the homelessness sector in mental health and drug and alcohol. And I just felt that there was always more. I felt that something was missing. So I worked in Vietnam for a couple of months. I did a project in India. So I kept doing these things because I wanted to get the big one, as in like a 2-year contract, as opposed to a 1-month paid volunteer. Or I was just sort of trying to get my experience up so that I would be considered for the big one.
I see.
And then the big one for me was Cambodia, which was the original, was a 2-year contract. So I started with that. Yeah. And then I never went home. It was meant to be a 2-year contract, go to Cambodia. And I rented out my place, as in to come back. I left all of my things in there, and it's been 15 years now, and I'm still here.
Nice. Is there, excuse the stupid question, but is there not enough mental health issues in Australia that you have to like fix other people out in the
I'm
world?
sure there's probably plenty. Yeah, look, I enjoyed it there too. I really did. I worked in community health centres. I had really good teams. I had good mentors and good supervisors. I loved my clients. People always laugh at me because I'm always like, I love my clients.
I love addicts.
But I love them because they turn up. It's really scary to say that you want therapy, then to seek therapy, to message that therapist and make that appointment, and then turn up. So I have a huge amount of respect for my clients because they do all of those steps because they want to get well, they want to feel better, and they turn up every week. And so I think that that's really special.
No, totally. I think to an extent, like admitting that you need help is like the biggest one. I think a lot of people are just stuck there and they don't ask for it, and then things ensue.
Look, I believe that everyone at some point in their life should seek counselling, and not because everyone's got serious problems, but because there's always something that you can find useful in therapy. I mean, I have my own therapist. There's always things to learn.
Yeah. And how much of it is like, okay, so now we're talking and I'm telling you about my life, let's say, and you can see something that I don't because of the vantage point. Is it mostly because of that, or is it like there's different devices and techniques?
Oh, look, there's loads of different therapy styles and therapeutic techniques. But yeah, of course, I will, part of my job is to read between the lines or to listen to what you're not saying and things like that. So
listen to what you're not saying. Can you like give me one little, like, how do I look for something that's not being said?
I think you need to be a trained therapist to do that. But I mean, there might be times when you're out with a friend and a friend is saying something and you're thinking, if you know them very, very well, you might be thinking, I feel like there's something else going on here.
Yeah.
It's that kind of feeling, but because these are not my friends, they're my clients.
Sure.
I'm sort of, I suppose, trained to look for these things, to notice these things. So, and body language, eye contact,
patterns,
all of these things, patterns. Yeah.
No, I get it. It's like thinking about just, emotional intelligence. And I know you've written books about emotional intelligence too, and I want to get to that. But I'm curious about these things because I've always been complimented by my emotional intelligence. So I was like, what are some, methods, like easy sort of like things that people can apply in their own life to be a little bit more like, if they feel like a lot of people come to them for advice or seek like counseling or whatever, is there any like toolkit that you can offer?
I think it's just be really aware outside of yourself. A lot of people, you want to have self-awareness or awareness of yourself, and then you want to have awareness of others. And that's really the bottom line of emotional intelligence is awareness of self, awareness of others and environment, to notice things that others might not notice, to pick up on the energies. And if you have a friend that's always excited and happy and talkative, and one day they turn up and they're really, really quiet, just to notice that, notice that shift in behavior and then ask them. Sometimes people are afraid to ask, but also then accept if somebody says that they don't want to talk, that you don't push them. Often people push others to talk when they actually don't want to, because the reality is you don't know why someone's feeling the way they're feeling, or you don't know how their day has gone or how their week has gone. So you don't want to be pushing because you don't know what the answer is. So it can also be dangerous to push someone that actually doesn't want to open up. So you've got to sort of have that awareness also, and just let people know that you're there for them. A lot of people talk about loneliness these days. And so I think letting people know that you're available is really, really important. But yeah, just noticing what's going on.
Yeah, awareness outside of yourself is huge. And also letting people know that you're there for them is another thing that I keep seeing like repeat in my life as well. Like seeing all these people that sometimes I interview, they say, oh, like they're making little shout outs to the freaking camera. It's like, if you need help, like I'm here. And I love that aspect of like having so much that, you know, like you can offer to people, you know. But I think there is something to be said about like if you don't have it together, you know, in a sense, like to go out and offer help to people. I don't know. Can you speak to it?
It's just dangerous.
Yeah.
It's the nicest thing I can say about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, a lot of people have good intention and want to help others,
Yeah.
but it's not always helpful if it's not good advice or it's not coming from a place of knowledge. You know, I have a lot of clients that will come and be like, oh, my friends told me to do this or my friend said that. And sometimes I'm like, oh, wow, like that's really not great advice.
Not what you should have heard.
Yeah, but, you know, but people are doing it with a good heart.
Right.
I think the biggest thing really is listen more than you speak.
What was it? I didn't hear. Can you say it again?
Listen more than you speak.
There it is.
Who was it that said you have 2 ears and 1 mouth?
Probably I'm gonna blurt out some really controversial name now, so I'll stop. So your way of sort of operating in this landscape of like mental health, has it we were volunteering, but in every interaction, was there like a tinge of like sort of support for the people that you're dealing with?
Support for me or support for them? In Cambodia?
No. What was your role there?
Originally, when I moved to Cambodia, I moved there as the organizational management advisor.
Oh, okay.
None of us, including me, knew what that meant, but I was like, woohoo, I'm going to Cambodia.
Yeah.
So I didn't really know what it meant. By the way, there's sunshine and rain, which means there's a rainbow somewhere.
Beautiful.
Sorry, I'm big into rainbows.
I'm big into this too. I put the camera over there so people can only see us, but we're in this big room with a few lovely people who are, you know, having the podcast with us. So this is the first time we have an audience. Yeah. And there's rain and sun at the same time. Rainbow.
Totally forgot what I was talking about. I got sidetracked by the possibility of a rainbow.
ADHD keeps in. You were talking about the role that you had over there, and which it was you didn't know what it was.
So organizational management advisor. That's right. And so I went in sort of not really knowing what it was going to be, and then I obviously met with the staff, and then I was interviewing all the staff to try and get an idea of what was going on and how the place worked. Within the first probably board meeting, so within probably a month or two, I was kind of being like, no, okay, you're general manager. So, because advisor at that point, it's like, well, who are you advising? Because the infrastructure wasn't there yet to have a team of people for me to advise.
Right.
So then the first role became, I was the general manager, and let's get the infrastructure of the staff in place so that we could eventually then train the staff up. But it was just a bit too chaotic and messy when I first arrived to be able to do that straight up.
I see. So that was a primer for this other question that I have. It's a little loaded one, so we'll take it a step at a time. But I watched this little TED Talk about how English teachers, I love the way you described how, like, when you enter into a culture, if you want to be well received, you better like learn the customs and the language, so like you'll get your point across easier. So a lot of the English speaking world, or like the universities, hold these exams, and like they're open to students from all around the world, but the prerequisite is that they speak English. And I've watched this TED Talk. I'm not sure if it was a TED. I'm pretty sure it was a TED Talk. But the lady was talking about, she's done English teaching in several, you know, countries around the world, and like wrote programs and everything. And she was saying like the gatekeeping of like the English speaking academia world, at least, is costing a lot of innovation and new ideas flowing through, just because people don't speak the language. Let's say we have someone in Africa who's got amazing bright ideas, but since they can't communicate it the way we want to hear it, then this like gets stuck in the pipeline. Did you see any of that happening?
I didn't when I was in Cambodia, mostly because my life was very Cambodian, and everything we did was in Khmer and was very Cambodian. When there were, and again, like, so we would have lots of things like French and German choreographers that would come and work with the kids. We'd have a lot of American rappers and MCs, like Akil from Jurassic 5, Major Lazer, Diplo. We'd have lots of big names. Yeah.
Diplo and Kimbo.
And music was the language. So there was no common actual verbal language.
Wow.
Yet they all worked together and then performed on stage together and then performed in theatres together and then we travelled the world together.
How was that like?
Yeah, amazing. But it was, so hip hop was the language.
Right.
So, and that's why, you know, the talk, my TEDx talk was Dance Your Life Around. Because hip hop can be a language and anyone that has experience in hip hop will see that sort of quite quickly. You know, we went to Italy at one point, me and KK, the founder, and 4 kids.
Yeah.
And by kids, I mean older teenagers. And we went to San Padriano, which is a drug rehabilitation community that has like thousands of people that live there. And every year they celebrate being free of drugs with a day called We Free. And they were that year inviting NGOs from all around the world that used hip hop to engage with disadvantaged people. So we were breakdancing with Ugandans, English, Canadian, Italian, and we were the only Asian country.
Wow.
And it was super interesting to see all of these different cultures and nationalities and age groups come together with zero language skill that was shared and dancing and, you know, high fives and hugs and crying when we're saying goodbye. And they formed these incredible friendships through the dance floor.
Yes.
So you don't always need language depending on what it is.
Yes. Well, I mean, music is the sacred language, obviously. You know, like that's not...
But yeah, for academia, yes, that's a different story.
Yeah.
But in the, I suppose, the creative arts world, and everyone here is in sort of the creative arts world, you don't necessarily need to speak the same language as someone else to be able to create something.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Like your medium is extremely important, like you said. Music and dance is kind of, I don't know. To an extent, I feel like this part of the world kind of looks at life as this dance or this song, rather like in the West it's more of like a construct, like a kind of like a building of some sorts, you know. So in that sense, music is definitely just pervasive, you know, all across the board because everyone responds to the vibrations.
And music changes the way you feel. You know, every now and then, if I'm posting mental health stuff or whatever on social media, if I'm going through a phase of posting, I will say something like, you know, pick your favorite I have to get up and dance song and put it on your playlist. And for the day that you think I can't get out of bed or I can't get motivated or I can't move or I don't want to, put that song on and watch what it does. It literally can like pick you up like that. It's amazing. I have a bunch of songs that just take me from 0 to 10 in seconds.
That's a pro tip. I think I'm going to use that in my psych song.
Yeah, and I often say to people, you need to have a playlist. And that playlist has to be ready.
Yes.
If you're feeling depressed or you're lying in bed or you're having a really tough day, that's not the time to try and make a playlist because you're not going to feel motivated to do it. You have to have the playlist. And then all you've got to do is press play.
That's nice. So. That's a really good tip for anyone who's just, you know, they don't have the will to. It's hard for me to relate because I've never had moments where I just really can't get out of bed. I've been sad, but it wasn't to a point where I needed like any sort of, or maybe I did. I'm totally blissfully unaware of it.
Yeah.
But music is definitely, I've always used music to like psych myself for like a little training, you know, like a little workout. Yeah. Music is just, yes.
There was that song, I don't know what it's called, but that song, I Get Knocked Down, But I Get Up Again.
Oh.
Do you know that song? I get knocked down, but I get up again. So it's got this amazing beat to it. And years and years ago, like, I forget how old I am, maybe 20 years ago, I played at a high level netball, which is, for those who don't know the sport, it's kind of like basketball. And we were at one of our big competitions and like a big regional competition. And it was tough, like, really tough games. And we were losing and it was half time. And we had the skill to win. We were just not getting there. And we were having the big pep talk at halftime. We're all like in a huddle. Yeah. And it was the grand final and we were losing. And that song came on. So it's like in the sports field where they have stadium music. And that song just came on. And all of us just sort of
Fire.
heard it. And by the end, we're all like so pumped. It was insane. And we got out there and we just like, bang, won the game and won the final. And it was the music. We all just looked at each other like, oh my God, we've got this. Let's go.
Yes.
We just completely pumped us up.
Yes.
So music can bring you up, bring you down.
Yes.
Same like you listen to meditation music to go to bed.
Right.
It brings you down. So music can move you in all sorts of directions.
I feel like speech is music to a certain extent,
Well, it's like if you are choosing a yoga teacher or a meditation teacher, one of the most important aspects, in my opinion, is voice.
Right.
So.
And like, absolutely. And what they say, how they say it, culture, like you want to be mentored by someone within your culture understands where you're coming from and how you view life. Like you don't want to fit in a mold of someone else.
Yeah. I remember being really, really surprised when I was asked to run meditations when I lived down south. And I didn't want to because when I was young, I was quite self-conscious of having such a deep voice for a female. And I was teased a lot for my deep voice. And I kept thinking, meditation teacher, my voice is not the right voice for teaching meditation. I thought that people would want sort of a slightly higher toned voice, I guess, and a bit more sort of up and down.
Right.
And I started, basically because they made me, I started teaching some meditation and people were loving it, but the whole room was going to sleep. I could literally put a room to sleep and I'm like, but is my voice working for this? And they're all like, your voice is like a sleeping tablet, but like in a good way.
Yes, yes.
So people liked the deep voice. So that was good. And I'd literally just knock out a room. And sometimes if I wanted to do, say, a visualization style meditation, so I like playing with meditation and doing interesting and fun stuff. And if I wanted to go through a visualization, I wouldn't allow anyone to lie down. I'd make them do sitting meditations because otherwise everyone goes to sleep. And I'm like, you're going to miss the fun stuff if you're sleeping. So I'd make them sit up. So
how was it to make peace with all these like things that people teased you about?
It's interesting because one was my voice.
Sure.
I was very much teased for having a deep voice, for sounding like a boy. And I was teased from every direction.
Yeah.
Teachers, kids, and even growing up, my dad he wouldn't tease me, but he would say, oh, so-and-so left a message, and they would say, oh, we rang and spoke to your son today. Now,
so
there were no boys in the house, so everyone knew they meant me.
You were being prepared for the Cambodia trip.
So I was constantly teased about my voice. And another one I was teased about was my nose. I didn't even think I had a big nose particularly until I was told that I did.
Same.
So,
American kids are the meanest freaking kids ever in life.
Well, when I was a young Australian, I didn't know any American kids, so I'm guessing Australian kids were mean too.
Yes, they're probably very mean. It's like,
but what was really interesting was when I got to Cambodia, they loved my nose, and I found that very kind of difficult to take.
Yeah.
There was this one little 4-year-old girl that I was in love with. She was so cute. She would come running up to me every day, jump into my arms, and then she would just keep pointing to my nose and sort of, elongating it. And everyone was constantly talking about my nose. And inside I could feel I would be getting really upset and really hurt.
Yeah.
And not understand why everyone wanted to look at my goddamn nose. It drove me crazy. And then some of the older Khmer kids, I'm like, what's with my nose? And they would say, oh, it's beautiful. I was like, what? And yeah, so a lot of Asians love the pronouncement of a big nose because they have a flatter nose and they'd be jealous, so they would constantly want to touch my nose. So I understood that they saw it as a sign of beauty and they wanted it, but it was very, very difficult to go in every day and have my nose touched when it was such a sore point for me. So it did take a while to accept that different features can be considered different in different cultures.
And it's so crazy. I just want to put this in there. I heard recently a Chinese girl, a friend who has a daughter and China goes to school. She was just telling me this verbatim. She's like, oh my God, they're making fun of me because I have no nose. She has too flat of a nose and they were making fun of her for not having a nose. Yeah. It's crazy.
And so people will tease you for all sorts of stuff. I was teased for having small eyes. I was teased that I was adopted from a Chinese family.
Were you?
No.
Oh.
So, and I'm fully Australian.
Right.
So, and then I come here, and if I make a comment to a Thai friend, oh, but I have small eyes, she looks at me and she's like, no, you don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So again, it's
all very
culture,
relative,
everything's relative to where you are and who you're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
But it's interesting.
It is. It definitely is. Oh, wonderful times. It's been an hour almost.
Is it?
Yeah. Time goes
50
by.
minutes.
Right. So let's get back to the book. What's your writing process like?
Different for different books. So I brought all 3 books here just out of interest.
Mm-hmm.
The first one I wrote in 2016 that came out of working at a health and wellness center for many years, where clients would constantly say, can't I take you home? And then they're like, can't you write a book? How do we take you home?
Right.
So that book came out of that.
It's kind of like an FAQ.
No, what I decided, because I noticed what I talked about back then every day, and to this day still do it, so 15 years later,
Sure.
I must say the word self-awareness 20 times a day. So I'm constantly talking about self-awareness, and I don't talk about emotional intelligence, but I talk about it without using those words.
Right.
So self-awareness, self-inquiry, journaling. I do a lot of writing therapy. So I put that into a book. So the first book that I sort of called Emotional Intelligence, but it's 5-minute guide to emotional intelligence. It's basically, it addresses, in the first few chapters that are super, super short, it addresses all of the excuses and reasons you could possibly come up for why you're not journaling.
Oh.
So, chapter 1 is procrastination. So once you've read chapter 1, you kind of run out of excuses already.
Then you have to journal.
Perfectionism, procrastination, journaling's only for the depressed. I don't have anything interesting to say. So all of those things get addressed straight away. And they're not simple solutions, but they're simple explanations. And then actually it's a 30-day challenge so there's not a lot of writing on my part. Every day is a question.
Yes.
And it's all about getting to know yourself better and seeing how you feel about things. So that was 2016. And then in 2019, I wrote The Key, a Social Emotional Toolkit for Teens.
It's a way bigger book.
It's a way bigger book, and it's a workbook. And that came out of a very specific story. I was running a creative writing workshop down south, and I had a woman in her 70s that attended the workshop. And in one of the writing therapy techniques, something really profound and serious came up for her.
Okay.
And then her and I talked about it after. But what it was she discovered something very traumatic that had happened in her past, but she only discovered it in her 70s in that workshop.
Interesting.
And whilst that was great, and I worked with her and we got through it, what upset me the most about that was that this woman had known something was wrong for about almost 60 years.
Whoa.
And she just worked it out in that workshop. But why I found that upsetting was I thought we are doing a complete disservice and injustice to our young people if we are not teaching them the skills to understand their events, their traumas,
They don't know what to look for.
Yeah, their resilience. If we're not teaching young people these things, then we are doing a disservice worldwide on a scale that's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
So I went to the top school in the state of Victoria, where I'm from in Australia, and I said this to them. I thought they would tell me to get lost, but actually they said, okay, what do we do next?
Wow.
So I said, I will go away and write the book. And I did. And I went back to Kopangan and I wrote the book. And I cover everything from mental health, emotional health, social health, friendships, family, divorce, how to be a good friend. Like, we always assume that it's someone else's fault. You're a bad friend. Well, are you being a good friend? Do you know what that means?
Yeah.
How do you look yourself in the mirror?
Of course.
What do you see? Do you like what you see? Why? Why not? So it's questions, and explanations and discussion groups and videos. And I wrote it so that every single school could implement it without me being there.
Yeah.
So it's for schools to implement. I have a lot of adults buy it, adults that feel that they didn't learn those skills when they were younger. I teach it in schools as professional development. I'm about to do one next week. And also kids themselves or families or teachers buy it.
That is the key, though. Can I
That's
just
the key.
piggyback off of what you said about how the lady had this profound moment?
Mm.
For me to continue doing this, the reason why we're sitting here and doing this is because someone said to me, it's like, okay, Fatih, some people have to learn things by hearing them a lot of times, right? And it just might be your video or like your word that helps them, get that. Maybe they have to hear it for 700 times,
Yeah.
Maybe your one will be number 700. So you have to perpetuate.
I totally
guess.
agree. Even in counseling, I'm not saying anything like new.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
But it might
It's not
be that
groundbreaking.
time that it works.
Yes.
I totally agree. And then the third book that was the first book, that was the second book, but then became the third book. My baby. This is my baby. So this one, Hip Hop and Hope, One Woman's Journey in the Slums of Cambodia. I actually started writing in 2013 and broke twice to write the other books. But this one was my baby.
Yes.
As in the other two books I love because I think they're super important for the world sort of thing, for other people.
Absolutely.
But this one was my baby because it was very much my heart and soul. And it's my life in Cambodia from the flight landing up until I walked out the door. And I think I never considered myself a writer, which people find funny because this is book number 3. And I still say it. I'm like, I didn't write this book because I think I'm an author.
Right.
I wrote this book because I had a hell of a story to tell, and it's a story that's not been told. And even all the expats in Cambodia were like, you have to write this book. You are the only one who speaks the language and is so embedded in the culture.
Yes.
Your experience of Cambodia is like no other Westerner.
Of course.
So you've got to write this book. And it started as a bit of a education book for people studying international development, community development, because I found when I landed, I felt very ill prepared for what actually happens when you're there.
Right.
So it started like that, and then it kind of turned into a story. So the lessons are still there, but it's now told through story.
And that's the best way to get a point across.
Yeah, and I made the audio book. I made it here, actually.
You read it, right?
Yeah, I made it here in Chiang Mai. If anyone needs a studio in Chiang Mai, these
You got
guys.
the hookup? Nice.
Yeah, amazing. Cool. So much fun. I never
might
knew.
actually take you up on that.
And that was a weird one, again, because of my voice. And not only did I read the whole book and do the whole audio book, I sang in it. And I kept it in. So for anyone who listens to the audiobook, I just found myself singing, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, oh my God, I'm singing. And I'm like, you're keeping it. And I kept it.
Get rid of it.
Yeah, I kept it. So that for me was actually a very big moment, but I loved doing the audio. I was so involved. I was laughing and crying. I looked insane, but I had a ball.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this is my baby, and I just got back from my first book tour in Australia.
But you're not an author.
But I'm not an author.
It's like, you know the meme? It's like, but I'm not a rapper.
Yeah.
No, never mind.
But so the book tour in Australia was amazing. I did 4 events across 3 cities, lots of
Where'd you go? Melbourne?
television. Melbourne, Sydney, Blue Mountains.
Blue Mountains.
I had events in all of them, and the feedback's been incredible. Like the reception has been. I was saying to friends when I got back, I would never have dared dream ever of this level of success with this book. I wouldn't have had the courage to imagine how successful the Australian tour was. I was hoping if 12 people are in the room, I won't feel stupid, and I hope at least 5 of them are not, my parents. Like I was worried.
Yeah.
And then to have like 70 people turn up, some of them I didn't know.
Yeah.
Strangers coming up, and have a line of people out the door waiting for it to be signed. I just sort of looked up and went, oh my God, this is insane. This is really happening. I'm living my dream, and I'm aware of it. You don't notice it at the time. I was really, really aware that I was living my dream right there and then, and it was just spectacular.
Yes.
And now I'm off to Ubud Writers Festival next month, which is a huge one.
Wow.
Like that. Yeah, I'm still surprised over it. And I see my name and I'm like, holy shit, that's my name.
Well,
against other people's big names. And I'm like, wow, that's wild. And then there'll be a big international festival here in November in Chiang Mai.
Beautiful.
Asia Pacific Writers and Translators have a big international writers conference here in Chiang Mai in November, and I'll be in that. So it's sort of like a 12 months of launching and events and
delightful.
publicity and interviews, and I'm loving it. I'm loving it so much, and it makes me super happy. And it was KK's birthday yesterday.
Oh, was it? No.
Founder,
Happy birthday, KK.
Happy birthday, KK.
If you're watching. Yeah.
So I was chatting with him, and I'm still, I still speak to them all every day, and still super close with everyone in Cambodia, and still love them all dearly. And I talk to them about this book all the time. They all know I'm writing a book. They all knew that I wrote a book. I got signed permission from them. I explained it 1,000 times over, and their reaction was always like, "Yeah, Mum, we trust you, Mum, whatever." And I'm like, "No, but I really want you to know that this is happening." They're like, "Yeah, Mum."
You're like, yeah, okay, yeah.
Because
there's so much love, though.
Well, yeah, totally, and the dream and the, I think, real possibility is that this will be turned into a movie. So,
dang.
Yeah.
Okay, Mom.
So yeah. And it's a shame that the guys are all old now.
Yeah.
But they're not
They age it a little.
17-year-old breakdancers. They're like 30-year-old with
Maybe
kids.
we'll find like smaller stunt doubles or like smaller lookalikes in
So there's
Cambodia.
a few of them that are still breakdancing at a very high level, and they could.
Dang, okay.
And they look young.
Yeah.
But still, like, one of them got engaged last week. A few are married. Some have kids.
Sure.
Some are still
the
breakdancing.
band is like...
But they still come together a lot. Like, they all have very separate lives now. They've all flown the coop as we want them to. They all have separate lives, but they do still come together. And normally I go back every year and we'll all go for dinner. And I look around the table and I'm just like, man. And it's always a matter of who cries first. So it's really, really fun.
Reminiscing the crump in the slums.
And what I noticed the difference is when I was living there, if we went out for dinner, it was like dinner's on Mum. And it was. I didn't expect them to pay. They didn't have, but I wouldn't take them anywhere fancy because I don't believe in such handouts. But if a few of us were going for dinner and it cost me a few dollars because it's Cambodia, whatever. But I noticed the last time I was in Cambodia, I think it was the first time ever, 12 of us or something went for dinner and nobody asked me to pay. They paid for their own food and their own drinks. And that was a big moment. For me, I'm like, they're adults. Yes. They pay their own way. They have jobs. They have responsibilities, and they know that now.
You see the lovely change.
And I was like, that was really cool. Yeah, that was the first time ever that I didn't buy dinner for everyone.
Yes.
That they all paid their own way. They all just divvied up the amount between everyone, and that was that. Wow. And that was, for me, I noticed that.
Very equal.
Yeah.
Well, this all sounds extremely delightful. I can only aspire to, I'm very happy that I'm part of the book tour a little bit. Yeah. I feel like I should take that.
Welcome to the book tour.
Here's the book tour in Chiang Mai and create things in Little Brown with my little audience. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Thank you.
And thank you for the listeners for tuning in. I'm going to be dropping all the links and everything that you need for Romi.
I thought you were going to drop the beats. I thought you were turning hip hop on me.
Yeah, we'll add some music in the after credits.
And the main thing with the links, very, very last sentence, is testimonials. The only way that the book moves is testimonials on like Amazon, Audible, Goodreads. So as much as I hate pushing that, that's the one thing that needs to be pushed so that it goes bigger than me and it goes out into the world. Is people write to me and say that was amazing, and I'm like, I love that, but.
No, absolutely. I think the messages in even this podcast, and I'm sure in the book, are messages that I am personally going back and like recollecting and sort of like pondering on it, because I think these are like timeless. Like we talked about self-awareness, which is like you can't talk about that enough, I feel like. So yes, to bring some testimonials would be amazing. So don't withhold your little support for all of us. Thank you so much, everybody, again.
Thank you.
See you on the next one.
Kapung ka.